Israel's recognition of Somaliland sets off a chain of condemnation. But could condemnation escalate to confrontation? As military tension around the region heats up, what is the real strategy behind Israel recognizing a breakaway province in a Muslim country? And are the people of that province prepared for what could come? I'm Andrea Sankin. Today's newsmaker is the breakaway region of Somaliland. Well, after Israel announced it recognized the breakaway region of Somaliland as an independent state, people on the streets of Mogadishu protested in anger, while those in Hargeisa celebrated. But questions abound as to what conditions are really attached to that recognition. It was reported that the U.S. and Israel wanted Somaliland to accept thousands of forcibly displaced Palestinians. Plus, having Israel as an ally on the Red Sea could entail allowing it military installations to attack Yemen and Iran. Here's a look.
Jubilation in one city, but condemnation in almost every other. People in the streets of Hargeisa, the breakaway region of Somaliland's main city, applaud the decision Israel made just days earlier to be the first country in the world to recognize it as an independent nation.
I express my wholehearted appreciation to the State of Israel for its brave decision.
But that status isn't merely disputed, it's rejected wholesale. No other UN nation recognizes Somaliland's independence. It's very much seen as part of Somalian territory. Somalia's president shot back at Netanyahu and Israel.
Somalia asserts and states in a loud voice that northern regions, namely Somaliland, are part of Somalia Republic.
On the streets of Mogadishu, Somalia's capital city, outpourings of public anger at Netanyahu's decision.
We gathered here in response to the offense committed by Israel against the sovereignty of our country.
Somaliland lays in Somalia's northwest arm, wedged between a coastline on the Gulf of Aden directly to its north, Djibouti to its northwest, and Ethiopia to its southwest. It was once known as British Somaliland, a protectorate that joined up with Italian Somaliland in 1960 to form the Somali Republic. The region unilaterally self-declared independence in 1991. That independence is unrecognized, but the breakaway region does have its own political institutions, currency, and a separate police force, and also enjoys a relatively higher degree of security and stability compared to the rest of Somalia, which is often affected by sectarian violence. Nevertheless, Somalia considers Somaliland part of its own sovereign territory, and until Israel's announcement, so does every other UN nation. The African Union, the Arab League, China, Turkey, and others rebuked Israel loudly. On the Somali president's visit to Turkey on Tuesday, President Erdogan hit out at Israel's actions, expressing support for Somalia.
Israel's decision to recognize of Somaliland was illegal and unacceptable.
We also extend our thanks to our partner countries, as well as regional and international institutions, for taking a firm stand against the violation committed by the State of Israel on 26 December this year.
Analysts suggest that Israel might be enthusiastic to build strong ties with Somaliland for strategic reasons, like a future campaign against the Houthis in Yemen. Israel struck out militarily at the Iran-backed Houthis in Yemen several times in retaliation for Houthi strikes on Israel during the Gaza war. Somaliland's location just across the Gulf of Aden from Yemen could provide Israel with a well-located base of operations near a future conflict zone. There are also concerns that Israel may forcibly displace Palestinians to Somaliland in the future, based on news reports that emerged earlier in 2025, which the president of Somalia categorically rejected. But as Somaliland celebrates, with only the isolated voice of Israel backing it, concerns are growing that Israel's actions may fuel regional instability. Whether a united international community not budging can force a U-turn remains to be seen.
So who really stands to gain from this unilateral recognition, and could it backfire on both Israel and Somaliland? Well, joining me now to debate that and more are from London, political analyst focusing on the Horn of Africa, Adam Matan. From Istanbul, international security analyst Hussein Abdikin. And from Tel Aviv, political analyst and contributor to Haaretz, Akiva Eldar. Thanks all so much for being with me. There are plenty of questions surrounding what Israel really gains from this and how much they can actually capitalize on it. Akiva, is it really in Israel's security interest, or is it more about right now creating a distraction from Gaza, especially given Israel just banned about 40 humanitarian aid organizations?
Well, Andrea, I think it's a combination of interests. First of all, as we know, and we mentioned it before, as President Secretary Kissinger said, Israel has domestic politics before international relations. And at this point, Israel is in the position of a beggar that can't be chooser. As many countries have actually practically declared Israel a pariah state, Prime Minister Netanyahu had to do a U-turn on his way to Miami to meet President Trump because Air Force One is not able to pass the route of the EU because Netanyahu is a rogue criminal. This is number one. Number two, of course, it is a strategic point in the Middle East, since Netanyahu would like very much to normalize, to have normalization with Saudi Arabia. And at this point, they insist on linking it to some kind of progress in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And Somaliland did not put any preconditions, and Netanyahu could not help but hugging them. The other thing is that it allowed Netanyahu to put a finger in the eye of his nemesis, President Erdogan, as we know, and the timing was perfect because the Somaliland president just visited Ankara, while Netanyahu, a few days before, has announced the creation of diplomatic relationship with Somaliland. Of course, he knew Netanyahu has been there forever, and he knew that Egypt, Turkey, and the UN, as well as the African Union, will condemn it, and he doesn't care. Actually, he would like to create enemies in order to be able to take the position of that they're all anti-Semites, anti-Israelis, and Israel is a victim, as always.
Right, okay. I could see you agreed with most of that, Adam, but let me ask you specifically about Somaliland, because yes, some people in Somaliland want independence, but is it worth celebrating recognition from a state like Israel, which Akiva describes as a pariah state? Even the UN has said it is carrying out a genocide on fellow Muslims. Is this really the partner they want? How does it serve Somaliland's interest?
I think this marriage of convenience is a recipe for disaster, and it doesn't serve Somaliland in any better. It doesn't give them any food to become an independent country. And in all honesty, you can already see Somaliland has been, to an extent, yes, some parts of Somaliland has been stable over the last 2 decades or so, but you can already sense on the ground the level of hostilities amongst communities who rejects this marriage of convenience. But the group who leads, or the elites who leads the Somaliland secessionist movement, has been trying to appeal to the global communities about their independency without not fulfilling the internationally required and formulas and mechanisms to become a nation. And now Netanyahu, who has all sorts of things that he wants to think about and wants to create tensions around him because things are falling around him, just found this desperate entity who will take on anybody. So I honestly think there is no win here for Somaliland in all aspects.
Right. So where do you fear it could actually take Somaliland? Because if I understand correctly, you are a unionist, but you're from Somaliland itself. So why do you personally resent this recognition and what it could cause?
Two things. One, the British protectorate Somaliland is divided into 3 communities. And 2 of those, one, the community in the northeast is already a recognized federal member state within the federal government of Somalia. So this is a directly trying to dismember an existing state, which is the federal government of Somalia. And also on the west of Somaliland, British protectorate Somaliland, is also a unionist community called an elderly state, and they're trying to set up a federal member state as we speak. And the central corridor of British Somaliland is the secessionist movement who are appealing to Netanyahu today, who wants to succeed from Somalia. So at local level, there is a fragmentation amongst those communities. It could embolden the secessionist movement to try to claim other communities' territories, which could cause a civil war. And we've already seen that. And in addition to that, Somalia has made a tremendous progress over the last 20 years. And it went through a process of state formation and reform of key infrastructure and institutions. And this action distracts the Somali federal government of all the work and the priorities that they've been doing. And now the energy and their resources has been shifted to this uncalled for provocative action of Netanyahu.
Understood. That's quite an ominous analysis. I hope the best for Somaliland's future, because a prospect of another civil war in the region is just devastating, to put it mildly. Let me move on to Hussein, though, and get kind of a Turkish perspective here. President Erdogan has labeled this as an attempt to destabilize the Horn of Africa and really distract from Gaza. Expand on that.
Actually, this final recognition of from Israel, it has a number of effects, both in the case of the Horn of Africa and then for the broader region and even for global politics. So on the one hand, while recognizing Somaliland as an independent country, Benjamin Netanyahu found an escape for his failure in domestic politics and also in his military operation in Gaza. But now he created his own success story. Right now, in a time when Israel is all alone in the global politics, even its relations with the United States sometimes tend to be shaky. Now he is trying to carve out a totally new ally from scratch. So from the Turkish perspective, that is not about Israel, that is not about Somaliland. It's more about Somalia as a whole. Because Turkey has invested heavily in the integrity of Somalia and its economic development. And there are mutual relations getting better and better with the current Somalian government between Turkey and Somalia. But this final attempt of Israel is attempting to break that tie as well by destabilizing Somalia. And, with all these memories of civil war and terrorism campaign, Somalia has suffered enough so far. But right now, there is a new potential for a new conflict, which is not just about Israel. It's not just about the bilateral relations between Turkey and Israel, but it might also destabilize the entire region, the Horn of Africa. And that is quite alarming for Turkey as well.
Yeah. Adam, I can see you agree. Let me ask.
Yes.
Let me ask Akiva, though, if there's a comparison to be made, perhaps I can describe it as maybe the glass is half full here. in that this could bear the same momentum as recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel actually did. I mean, just a few have bothered to do so after the United States said that it was taking it off the table. This was the final decision made on Jerusalem, and everyone would follow suit. No one has, except a few countries that mean really very little to Israel's international relations. Is it possible that we're looking at the same situation here?
Well, in this case, Israel was in the frontier. And the fact that President Trump, when he met Netanyahu knew that he's about to see the president. And I'm sure that President Trump was not taken by surprise. The fact that he did not embrace Israel on that, but I think that nobody asked him for his response. But it seems that Netanyahu has his blessing. And this is what matters. Netanyahu cannot expect anything positive from the EU as long as Gaza is inside. And there was a statement by several countries yesterday in regard to the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, including even Japan, that has always been careful to follow the United States, and while the foreign minister is about to visit Israel. So I don't think that Netanyahu expected other countries to follow suit. What he needed is, as you mentioned, Andrea, at the beginning of the discussion, what Netanyahu needed is to distract the attention of the Israeli people for, all the scandals, including leaking a document by his entourage and his trial. And he knows that the year that will start tomorrow is going to be an elections year. And what he needs is positive headlines. And, he can describe this as another country joining the Abraham Accords, and he got away with it.
On that, though, Akiva, I mean, isn't it a bit dangerous then for Israel right now when you talk about the Abraham Accords and his almost desperation to not just maintain them but expand them? Is it dangerous to have the Saudi and UAE splitting now over these separatist groups in Yemen, as well as the war in Sudan? I mean, how does this really serve the UAE as well, which is making a point of not condemning Israeli action here?
Well, I think that the Saudis know that it allows Israel to coordinate with Somaliland in collecting intelligence about the Houthis and about Iran. Actually, we have mutual interest to contain Iran. And right now, the discourse in Israel is about a possible round of violence escalation with Iran, which means escalation in the Houthi frontiers. And in this regard, most Israeli mainstream think tanks believe that Netanyahu did a very positive step, because the enemy of my enemy is a friend, and this is the way. The other thing is that nobody is asking the question, how come that Israel is recognizing the sovereignty and the independence of a remote country in Africa, and at the same time, Israel is, I think, the only country in the West that refuses to recognize the right of the Palestinian people for self-determination.
Yes, that was challenged at the United Nations outright by the president of Slovenia. It is ironic. But let me move to Adam quickly, because, if you can speak as well about where the UAE really stands in all this, because we have the African Union condemning all of this as a single unit and warning that it has very far-reaching effects. So what exactly does that mean, and where does this also leave you, specializing in the Horn of Africa, Ethiopia?
I think the Emiratis haven't said anything on this issue through the official public statements. There has been a member of the Arab Parliament who condemned this issue at the chamber of the Arab Parliament, but I think probably he didn't want to be left alone in the room because everybody else condemned the move of Netanyahu. So the Emiratis, I think, the relationship between the Emiratis and the Somali people. Somalis has for majority of the people of Somalis that I have in contacts with, I engage with, has a very negative outlook of the Emiratis. They believe the Emiratis are always working against the interests of Somalia, always trying to prop up individuals who doesn't have the best interests at heart for Somalia, especially some of those federal member states who are not in line with the federal government's priorities and strategic and interests. And also equally, they've been engaging with Somaliland for a very long time. The deal that they signed at the Berbera port has been controversial at the beginning, but eventually it got the approval and they stand with the federal government and they were able to establish the ports there. But the Emiratis, honestly, you have seen what happened yesterday in Yemen, and Somalia has been following that very closely. Somalia issued a very strong-worded letter in support of the Saudi coalition, and I hope the Somalia will be able to utilize this particular fallout that has happened in Yemen and show the world the destruction and the negative activities that the Emiratis has been taking in Somalia. And equally also the Ethiopians has been very quiet on this issue too, trying to assess the situation. And as you know, the Ethiopians has, I don't know, you can call it between a rock and hard place. Yeah. They wanted to get a free boat access, which they don't have to go through all those noises that they've been making over the last few decades. And Somaliland is the easy win for them if it was recognized. But equally, Ethiopia itself is a very fragile and country. There is a lot of aspiring secessionists within Ethiopia. The Tigrayas want to be separated from Ethiopia eventually. The Somali region has the aspiration is to be potentially independent from the rest of the Ethiopia. And there are so many other ethnic groups who are not happy with the central government of Ethiopia. So do they start this floodgate for their own countries? And also what actions would you expect from Somalia? And if I was the Somali president and Ethiopia take the action to recognize one of my regions who wants to succeed from Somalia, I would do the opposite. I would be encouraging and supporting and recognizing secessionist groups within Ethiopia. So I think they are trying to assess between those two difficult positions.
Yeah, Hussein, if you could also comment on whether there is real grounding in the belief that this is an effort to build a kind of buffer against the Houthis, against Iran, build a launching pad for attacks on the Somaliland coastline. Do you think that is indeed the case? Do you see it as an actual threat to the region? Or would it be very difficult for Israel to actually construct that?
I think it's part of the story. So with Somaliland, I believe Israel is aiming to have a foothold in the Horn of Africa, to use it as an operation base against Houthis or against any other potential rival in the area. And they might have also a leverage over the transition routes in and out of the Red Sea. So that is, I think, a very strategic location which can allow Israel to operate freely. I think that's the idea. We will not know until it happens. Maybe Somaliland will not allow it. We don't know it for now. But I think that's part of the plan for Israel. But apart from that, I think a second point here is about diverting the attention away from Gaza to other parts. Because this particular area, from the Horn of Africa to the rest of Sahel region, is full of potential and sometimes actual active conflict zones. I'm just thinking about the Tigray civil war, the Tigray conflict, just very close to this Somaliland area, and the rest of the Sahel area, from Jenin, whatever you call it, Jenin, ISIS, Daesh, to some Tuareg rebellions, and it's a very hot zone. And when Israel starts this chain reaction in the Sahel area, in the sub-Saharan Africa, I think now people will have less attention to pay to Gaza. And now Israel can say that, look, there are other conflicts nearby, so there are other casualties, other massacres, and I think this is just one way for Israel to divert attention away from Gaza. So I think these are multiple priorities. It's not just one single easy answer.
Okay. Akiva, we've got 40 seconds left. I mean, is there a potential upside here in that, with so much fragmentation in the region and between Israel and allies and former allies, that no one would be able to create alliances even strong enough anymore to lead to a military confrontation, because there is so much fragmentation and infighting that it somehow keeps us further away from actual all-out military conflict?
It takes us back to the 40s of the previous century when Israel was established. This was the Ben Gurion strategy, that since Israel was not able and didn't have partners around it, including Syria, Jordan, Egypt, he created a kind of an axis of peace with the second ring that included Turkey, Ethiopia, and to bypass the immediate neighbors.
Okay, Akiva, we're going to have to leave it there. I really apologize. We're completely out of time for this edition of the Newsmakers. I'd like to thank all three of you so much for being with me, our viewers for joining us as well. You can follow us on social media, and do be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.